Mr. Fichtner, how are you, sir?
Hey, Mike, doing fantastic.
So tell us what you're seeing in this industry and how Symphony is helping the industry, multifamily providers specifically, with the 5G Enigma.
Yeah, thanks so much. I appreciate it. I'm not nearly as old as Dick, but I have been in this industry 4 decades, so I'm chasing you, Dick. Multifamily technology. Symphony's approaches, we're a little different animal than the rest of the folks here. Our brand is really about doing the entire panoply of technology systems in a building, including the RF side, which is our main emphasis, but anything else. And so I have a whole division around IoT because we look at that as the convergence of all of these platforms, wired, wireless, et cetera, et cetera. And I wasn't really in the mood for doing a cutesy short title because I really wanted to think, if I'm a building owner, what am I trying to think about right now? I have to make a decision. Like today, I'm going to make technology decisions around wireless services and my internal building technologies and what am I supposed to do? So that's how I positioned this whole talk. So go to the first slide if you would. Yeah. So what I try to do is say I think there are some 5 or 6 questions that you want to ask, and the first one, and I appreciate Dick mentioned the whole public safety side of things, because in most jurisdictions, the public safety, what the International Fire Code the acronym would be the ERCS. So don't mind, I'm not burping. I'm just saying ERRCS. Most jurisdictions will allow you to converge that with the DAS, and so that's one of the first things you want to find out because that gives you optionality. You virtually in every environment except for a stick-built garden style, you can expect to have to build out an ERCS, and therefore you've got infrastructure that in most jurisdictions, there are a few exceptions, and we're working in hundreds of municipalities, but the 90+% of them will let you converge it to. That's the first question, and then I think you have to make a real decision about how much the owner is going to provide Wi-Fi. And Dick loves to see them do what we traditionally call bulk Wi-Fi. I'd love to do it too. A lot of owners are just dead set against it. And so the pattern's been, a common area Wi-Fi, and that's it, just Clubhouse, et cetera, et cetera. Seeing a little bit more, we're doing what we're calling blanket Wi-Fi, which is still, it's relatively private. They have a small, very bandwidth constrained public usage of it, but it's meant basically for the connection of IoT devices. So it's not really meant as a service for the residents. They're still expecting that the residents are going to get Cox or Verizon or some of the other guys that aren't on this panel, and provision their own services. So that's the first decision you need to kind of make. And those were the next 2 questions, because that then affects, again, more optionality. We are involved in some CBRS deployments or on-go alliance, if you will. And for a bigger facility that has a lot of other type of wireless connectivity, I'll give you an example. A hospitality environment that has a lot of gaming, for example, there's now the opportunity to connect devices that previously were only allowed to be wired, such as gaming equipment, can now be connected. So, for example, Las Vegas, Nevada Gaming Commission has recently agreed that, well, they never would have allowed equipment to be connected by Wi-Fi, but the added security benefits of LTE on CBRS, they're willing to see equipment be connected wirelessly, and that gives huge opportunity to redo gaming floors, etc. I don't think it's that viable or relevant in an MDU space, but it's at least worth considering. I think it's one of a significant consideration. And then, of course, you have to assess the quality of the cell coverage. And I think what Dick, some of the recommendations Dick makes are spot on. And I want to thank all the panel members for going through all the hard technology stuff, so I don't have to. So thank you very much for that. But they're absolutely right. From Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, WiGig, they represent increasing ability to seamlessly walk in and out of a building, and even some of the OEMs, like say Ruckus, have done work to colo the acronym is EPCs, but into these evolved program cores where the carriers are located, so you can facilitate that seamless handoff between the Wi-Fi call and the cellular call. But so I do see that, but one of the things we're finding is that doesn't necessarily accommodate visitors, which represent 40% of the traffic in a building. And so, and I'm not really referring again to the garden style, but more like the mid-rise and high-rise kind of environment. I do think people are concerned. We've had any number of situations where we've had customers come back to us and ask us to overbuild what I'm going to call a best effort DAS in their environment, a distributed antenna system to propagate that current 4G connectivity to the building. Those, I think, in very brief summary, are the main considerations, and then that leads me to some recommendations. So that's the next slide. Again, I'm kind of trying to take technology and turn it into a, kind of a business solution, technology problem, business solution, or business problem, technology solution, if you will. And I mentioned this earlier, but, I think you have to assume that you're going to have to put a public safety DAS or an ERCS into your building, unless it's stick-built. And even there, we're seeing it in some environments. And then that gives you an asset. It's an infrastructure. We would recommend that if you're going to do that, you go ahead and put a little bit more robust, this has to do with the connectors and the couplings and the fittings, so that gives you an infrastructure that actually can manage or handle all of the low band and all of the mid band type of RF propagation that you might want now or in the future. Thankfully, some of the guys here talked about the low, mid, and high band, and that's really going to become a more common parlance that you'll use in talking about 5G. So this gives you the ability with one infrastructure to manage two of those three layers, the low and the mid band. Obviously, make a decision about how you want to do Wi-Fi and whether you want to just do the common area, et cetera, et cetera. And I totally agree with what everybody else has said. They're complementary. Where I think this becomes really significant is if you start looking into the transition from 4G LTE to 5G NR technology. So a lot of people don't realize the same frequencies that are used for 4G are going to be used for 5G, but there's a different protocol, new NR, which is a very fancy acronym for new radio. People are always kind of amused at the fact that these acronyms that sound so, technical are really just kind of simple, but that they're where you do have this need to perhaps do a cellular augmentation, for best effort. You really got to have an eye to what will that look like when the carriers rotate from LTE to NR, because they will, and they're not going to announce it or ask your permission. They'll announce it. They're not going to ask your permission. They'll go to probably a parallel operation for a while, and then they'll rotate it. So you're going to want to make sure that the way you design any augmentation platform has that capability to seamlessly convert into that new protocol. We think it's worth evaluating some of the new RF technologies. We don't think there's a good business case today. And from a high band perspective, and boy, it would take a lot more than just this panel to really get into it. I think everybody's acknowledged you're never going to get the high band to penetrate from outside to inside, not even close. So the question is, will you need high band inside? I think I agree with Dick in the multifamily space. You're going to probably want to manage most of that high bandwidth, low latency traffic with Wi-Fi 6 and then WiGig. And you're not going to even attempt, and maybe never, to bring those high band cellular solutions in. You'll be relying much more on your Wi-Fi. And I think that's so far away that I don't think it's prudent to try to, put in fiber where you guess things are going to go, because I think it's a 5 to 8 year time frame. That's really all I wanted to try to talk about.
No, that's great. I do want to kind of follow up on one thing that you had mentioned around, you're talking about DAS in general. Are the carriers funding DAS? We always talk about they're funding DAS and stadiums and things like that. But are they actually funding DAS knowing that this 5G and Wi-Fi 6 is coming along? Like, are they going to continue to fund the DAS? Like, where's that going for us? They typically don't fund it in our space, right, in multifamily. But I'm just kind of curious how you see that playing out. Like, is that going away because of the convergence of Wi-Fi 6 and 5G?
Well, if you have a large enough facility, you have a great opportunity to get DAS funding if you can move your facility to a future Super Bowl city, because a lot of money gets dumped into those markets.
Yes.
So if you're able to pick it all up and move it there, let's say, Phoenix in 3 years, I think that's a great thing to do. Outside of that, the only other mechanism, if you're not a stadium, arena, airport, casino, is to be able to show the carrier the poor performance in your environment. And the way the carrier is going to look at it is, and we actually have a mechanism, hired a guy out of JDSU that does network performance analysis with a pretty sophisticated tool, where you can show the carrier, you have very poor performance issues here. He's going to first want to solve it with a tower or a rooftop. If he can't solve it that way, he's going to want to solve it with small cell. If he can't solve it that way, then his last recourse is he will pay to put a DAS in. So I'm not seeing it in a smaller MDU environment, 300,000-400,000 feet, but we're in some mixed use environments, say 800 to a million square foot. I've got 2 projects pending now where the carriers are interested because they've got performance issues, and it's a large enough venue to where if they fund that DAS, they're going to offload enough traffic to where they would actually it would improve their network performance.